Jessica, can you come in?
Very good morning, good afternoon, and good evening for all that are joining us from across the Asia Pacific region and beyond. Welcome to the World Food Safety Day 2025 Web Regional Celebration for Asia Pacific. And my name is Jessica Camari Lopez. I'm the Technical Officer for One Health and Zoonotic Diseases at the World Health Organization Regional Office for the Western and Pacific, based in Manila. And I'm very honored to open today's event, celebrate this year's theme, Food Safety Science in Action, which underscores the vital role of evidence-based approaches in building food safety systems that protect public health and facilitate fair trade. If we can move to the next slide. And just to inform that our webinar today is being live streamed on YouTube and different platforms, and the recording of the presentations will also be made available later. So we actually really encourage your active participation throughout the event today. Moving ahead. For today's objective, we really would like to raise awareness about the role of science in food safety, and you will be hearing more from our experts today. Elaborate more on how science-based data and information is used to formulate codex standards and how this contributes to consumer health protection. Of course, to share knowledge and best practices, to generate data and scientific evidence and inform policy decisions and other formulations of food safety standards. And last but not least, but to encourage participants to strengthen science-based policy decisions on food safety in respective countries, regions, or organizations. With that said, moving ahead. Today's agenda, we will have two keynote presentations for our experts in the region, and then we will move ahead to a panel discussion focusing on science-based food standards with great food safety experts from across the region to share their experiences with us. Next. With that, I would like to move ahead to Ms. Sarah Scahill's opening remarks. Ms. Sarah is the Secretary of the Codex Alimentarius Commission, and I will hand that over to the team to deliver her opening remarks. Thank you.
Dear FAO and WHO colleagues, dear panelists, dear participants, it is a pleasure to join you today, albeit virtually, on the occasion of World Food Safety Day 2025. So let me begin by wishing you all a very happy World Food Safety Day. This year's theme, Food Safety, Science in Action, is one that is very close to my heart. Having gotten a degree in science before moving on to do a research doctorate in microbiology, science has influenced my view of the world and my work for many years. The mission of the Codex Alimentarius Commission has been defined as protecting consumer health and promoting fair practices in the food trade by setting international science-based standards for food safety and quality. So science is at the core of standard setting. Science is at the core of the work of the Codex Alimentarius Commission. So I think it is fair to describe many of the standards, guidelines, and codes of practice of the Codex Alimentarius Commission as an example of science in action. Without science, without the scientific advice provided by a whole range of FAO and WHO expert bodies, such as the Expert Committee on Food Additives, which also addresses contaminants and veterinary drugs in food, the Joint Meeting on Pesticide Residues, the Joint Meeting on Microbiological Risk Assessment, the Joint Expert Meeting on Nutrition. Without the scientific advice provided by them, together with the data collection and research efforts of members, academia, and the food industry, we would not have over 14,000 quantitative standards, including MRLs for pesticides and veterinary drugs in foods, and MLs for contaminants in food, as well as MLs for food additives. We would not have guidelines and codes of practice recommending effective risk management options to control a range of food safety hazards. Options we have confidence in recommending because science has underpinned their development. And when we reach out to member countries to ask them about the use of Codex standards, over 80% of respondents from low and middle income countries would not be telling us that Codex standards are a key input to their food policies, regulations, legislation, and food control systems without the knowledge that science underpins these standards. Basing Codex standards on science is, I believe, a key contributor to establishing consensus in standards development and a high level of trust in the final standards. It is also the scientific basis of Codex standards that means they are referenced as the benchmark standards for the safety of food in international trade by the World Trade Organization's agreement on the application of sanitary and phytosanitary measures. Because within that agreement, the use of science and risk assessment is considered fundamental to the determination of the appropriate level of sanitary protection. This is simply to say, food safety risk management should be based on science and risk assessment. But to ensure that we have essential scientific basis to underpin standards and food safety risk management, we need a commitment to science and at multiple levels. Science is not something that happens in isolation in a test tube. It requires commitment to and resourcing of data collection, data curation and analysis, research into methodology, hazard behavior and toxicology, monitoring of analysis of the efficacy of control measures. The list goes on. Many of us contribute to that in different ways. But I often hear we don't have enough data or data on a specific aspect in order to provide the science and risk basis for decisions. And I'm sure that is true. But at the same time, I'm not convinced we make optimal use of all the data and information we do have to inform scientific assessment and subsequent food safety decision-making. And there may be many reasons for this, from inadequate data management systems to communication. So perhaps something we can all take away from World Food Safety Day this year is a commitment to look at our role in science and see if there is anything we can do to ensure that science is contributing to action. The mantra for World Food Safety Day since its inception has been food safety is everyone's responsibility. Equally, I believe we all have a role to play in ensuring science is put into action to ensure food is safe. Science has the ability to level the playing field when it comes to discussions in food safety standards and food safety management, to ensure that consumers, wherever they are afforded the same level of safe food. But this only happens with your support. And I hope this discussion today, through illustrating science in action, also leaves you with a greater understanding of what is needed to ensure science continues to underpin food safety standards and actions to ensure food is safe. Once again, happy World Food Safety Day and wishing you a successful and informative event.
Hello and welcome. Greetings from the Food and Agriculture Organization of the United Nations, FAO.
And greetings too from the World Health Organization, or WHO.
Every year on the 7th of June, FAO and WHO jointly lead the celebrations of World Food Safety Day.
Because no one should get sick from eating food, and everyone has a role to play in keeping it safe.
This year, we celebrate the science behind food safety with the theme Food Safety, Science in Action.
Science helps us to understand what makes food unsafe and guide us on how to prevent foodborne disease.
But it is not only the knowledge of science that keeps our food safe, it is rather our actions. Actions based on the guidance and advice developed by scientists.
Governments rely on science to inform their policies, and food businesses follow scientific advice to apply it to good production practices.
And consumers rely on science-backed advice from governments and food providers when they make decisions about the food they eat.
So science is at the heart of food safety.
On this World Food Safety Day, we acknowledge the work of scientists, educators, and the contribution we all make to food safety through our actions.
The use of scientific knowledge is key to reducing illness and related costs, and more importantly, it saves lives.
Join us this June the 7th for World Food Safety Day to celebrate our shared commitment to science and food safety.
Together, we can ensure that all people everywhere consume safe food.
Let's put
Let's put science in
into
action.
action.
Great. We just heard from both WHO, FAO directors for food safety, and also from the CODIS Secretariat to kick off our World Food Safety Day. Well, to make things a little bit more dynamic and for all of you to engage further with us, we will have a Slido session. And I will hand over to Mr. Syed Hossain, food safety expert, which is also part of the food safety team in the WHO Regional Office for the Western Pacific, that will be conducting us through the dynamic session. So Syed, over to you. Thank you.
Thank you. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to everyone joining us today. I am sharing the slide. Yeah, this is Syed Moazzam Hossain. Actually, I am a food safety expert working in WHO Wipro. So a warm welcome to our webinar in celebration of World Food Safety Day 2025. This year's themes: food safety, science in action, shines in a spotlight on the critical role that science plays in keeping our food safe. Before we begin with the main program, so let's start with a short ice break session to set the tone. So let's talk a moment to interact, share, and reflect on our own experience with the food safety. Before starting the session, let's check the instruction on how to join the poll on Slido. So if you are using a laptop, mobile, or any gadget like phone or any gadget, so if you can type www.slido.com, and then if you insert the 2355397, the number in the Slido, so that's actually directly take you to the main polling system. And also there is one QR code on the right hand side. So if you are using any phone or any gadget, I think if you can scan the QR code, that's also take to you on the main screen of our polling system. So if I think maybe you are joining, so just I'm waiting for a few seconds. So if everyone will join, then I can start our main the polling session. So I hope all maybe already get access into the system. So let's start the main program. So the first question is, which country are you joining from? So this is the first question. Actually, I know that a lot of people, they have participated in this webinar. So hopefully around the world, a lot of people are joining. So that will be very interesting, actually, how many countries are representing this webinar. See, yeah, there is a lot of the countries came in showing in the display. So it's very amazing for us to joining in this webinar. Yeah, thank you. So I am going to my next question. So what sector are you representing? I know there are the different dimension people are joining in this webinar. So actually that will be helpful for us, actually, what type of people and what sector are representing this webinar. So that will be grateful for us too. So yeah, I saw there are a lot of people are joining from the government side as well as the international organization. The private sector also very useful here. Yeah, that's good. So yeah, thank you. So now I'm going to my next slide. So this is actually, there are some few questions actually, for the breaking of the ice. So you know very well which organization is jointly established the Codex Alimentarius Commission. We know very well the Codex Alimentarius Commission. So actually, yeah, this is the majority they say it's FAO and WHO. They have formed the Codex Alimentarius Commission. This is the correct, because in 1963 FAO and WHO they formed this Codex Alimentarius Commission. This is the actually there are very the good standard setting body actually the develop different types of food standard, code of practices and guidelines. Thank you. So I'm going to my next question. What does the Codex Alimentarius aim to protect? Yeah, there are few. The most of the people they say consumer health and fair trade practice, and few people also get the answer on the trade monopolies. And actually, the main theme, objectives of the Codex Alimentarius Commission is to protect the consumer health, as well as Codex also the part of the SPS agreement by the WTO. So is also help to the fair trade practices in the world. So thank you for your answer. I'm going to my next question. Which are the 3 international standard setting bodies recognized in a WTO SPS agreement? Yeah, that's good, because as per the this sanitary and phytosanitary agreement that's are developed in 1995 by WTO. So they also defined 3 standard setting body. One is the Codex Alimentarius Commission, one is the IPPC, and one is the World Organization of Animal Health. So yeah, this is the big that's the true, correct answer. A few people also they make the answer for the FAO, WHO, ISO, but the correct answer is the Codex Alimentarius Commission, IPPC, and World Health Organization of Animal Health. Thank you. Next. How does science help prevent foodborne illness in packaged food products? Yeah, that's true. Through the microbial testing and shelf life prediction, this is the correct answer, because the packaged food actually that's depends on the shelf life of the the product commodity. So there's actually need to test the shelf life of the packaged product, as well as need to check the microbial test in the lab. So this is the correct answer. The next question is, why food safety considered a scientific process? Yeah, most of the people they said it is uses evidence testing and data to manage food risks, and few people also relies on cooking skills and experience. So the correct answer is the evidence testing and data to manage food risks, because actually food safety that depends on the evidence, and evidence also depends on the science. So there is a the correlation between the science and the food safety. So always food safety actually need to the test and data for the manage of the food risks. So this is then another one question: which of the following is not a principle of food safety science? Yeah, most of the people they say test preference. Yeah, that's true, because actually the hazard analysis, risk assessment, and the traceability. This is the the component of the food safety, but the test preference is the component of the food quality. So the test preference is the correct answer. What role does risk assessment play in food safety science? Yeah, that's the correct answer. Estimate the potential harm for food hazard, because the risk assessment actually need that's our the figure out what is the potential harm in the food hazard. So that's we'll find out in the through the risk assessment. So this is the correct answer. So my next question is, how does science support food safety regulators? Yeah. Most of the people they say that provides evidence for the setting of food safety standard, because the evidence or the science actually they help to develop the food safety standard, and the regulator they will take the standard for the the enforcement or the implementation of the food safety in a member state or any country. So this is the correct answer. Yeah. Thanks. Thank you, everyone. This is my last question, and thank you to everyone joining today ice breaking. I hope this actually helped us to get into the next session for the key discussion and the panel discussion. Thank you, everyone, for joining today. Have a nice day.
Thanks, Ayad. It feels that we got nice comments in the end, so the icebreaker was hopefully successful and good to share some curiosities and some good information all over. So moving ahead, we will move towards our keynote speaker session, and we will start with a presentation from Professor Samuel Godefroy, which is a professor of food risk analysis and regulatory policies at Laval University in Quebec City, Canada, and also the president of the International Union of Food Science and Technology, UFOST, and Global Food Regulatory Science Society. So we will move ahead to Professor Samuel's presentation, and we will continue from then onwards. Thank you.
I would like to start by thanking our colleagues and partners from the Regional Office of the World Health Organization in New Delhi for their kind invitation to contribute to this commemorative event of World Food Safety Day for 2025 under the theme of Science in Action. I will be attempting to contribute to today's discussions by offering an initial presentation on the way science can contribute to addressing a number of challenges related to food safety and, of course, to food sustainability and how science can offer us the solutions to reach more resilient and more sustainable food systems. Food systems today sit at the nexus of multiple interlocking challenges. First, we must feed nearly 10 billion people by 2050, even if climate change, land degradation, and water scarcity continue to squeeze agricultural productivity. Second, almost 1/3 of all food produced never reach a plate. And this is costing the global economy roughly $1 trillion every year and account for up to 10% of greenhouse gas emissions. Third, unsafe food already causes about 600 million illnesses and is in fact responsible for about 420,000 deaths per year. All these illnesses and deaths are preventable, yet they contribute to erode public health, they erode trade, and they undermine consumer trust. Science equips us to address these challenges with powerful and complementary solutions. Climate-smart agronomy and precision breeding help us lift yields in a sustainable manner. Cultured meat and precision fermentation proteins help reduce land and water use while reducing the need for a number of agricultural inputs, particularly pesticides and veterinary drugs. The systematic study of traditional knowledge is helping to uncover climate-resilient grains, pulses, insects, and fermentation cultures that diversify diets and help enhance nutrition. Smart cooling chains, artificial intelligence that predicts demand, packaging that keeps food fresh for longer periods, and processes that turn unavoidable byproducts into useful ingredients or energy help curb the 1/3 of food that is lost or potentially wasted. And whole genome sequencing, rapid diagnostics, and cold pasteurization techniques help stop contamination before it spreads. Now, when we harness these innovations together, we can transform food security and safety from persistent vulnerabilities into pillars of resilient, sustainable development. Science is also paramount to support decision-making processes underpinning food control systems. By grounding rules in transparent, data-driven risk assessment, by investing in shared scientific databases, and by training regulators in modern methodologies such as exposure modeling, science helps transform food regulation from a patchwork of inconsistent judgments into a predictable and internationally harmonized system that protects consumers while giving innovators a clear, reliable pathway to market. Let us now examine some illustrations of how science can help address today's food systems challenges with emphasis on food safety. Climate change is shifting the food safety landscape. Warmer, wetter conditions favor pathogens such as Salmonella and Vibrio in a number of food products like produce or seafood. Drought-stressed crops accumulate more mycotoxins, and extreme weather disruptions will lead to other types of disruptions, such as the disruptions of cold chains or raising the risks of spoilage. Now, of course, science offers countermeasures on several fronts. Climate-informed predictive models and satellite-linked early warning systems help flag emerging hazards. Whole genome sequencing again helps to pinpoint the outbreaks much faster than ever before. We are also witnessing the use of heat-free technologies like high-pressure pasteurization and pulsed light techniques which help neutralize microbes without degrading the quality, particularly the nutritional benefits of food. And breeding programs informed by genomics will help produce crop varieties that are less prone to toxin-producing fungi. Together, these innovations, these tools, allow both regulators and industry alike to anticipate climate threats and to be able to safeguard the food supply despite a warming world. In many developing nations, food safety risks tend to be amplified by high ambient temperatures, by intermittent refrigeration, and by limited laboratory capacity and fragmented supply chains. Science-driven improvements in food processing can close these gaps, and these gaps can be closed indeed in a manner that is quick and affordable. For example, low-cost and locally manufactured solar dryers and improved smokers help reduce microbial loads and aflatoxin growth in grains, in nuts, and in fish by cutting moisture to levels that are considered to be safe. Processing solutions offer access to shelf-stable milk, to sauces and ready-to-eat meals without relying on cold chains. At the same time, rapid diagnostics tools such as portable PCR kits and smartphone-linked biosensors, and even simple paper-based tests often developed through research collaborations will give producers and regulators alike on-site diagnostics that once required distant laboratories. When we combine all this with training programs, such as programs on the propagation of preventive controls like hazard analysis and critical control points, and good manufacturing practices, these science-based processing and testing tools will allow small and medium enterprises to meet safety standards, to reduce post-harvest losses, and to gain access to higher value local and export markets, ultimately improving not only public health, but also the income of rural farmers. To build sustainable food systems for the future, we must broaden our sources of nutrition. On the one hand of the spectrum, we see cutting-edge research that is creating entirely new food ingredients in laboratories. And on the other hand, we are in fact harnessing traditional knowledge and helping to discover underutilized food. So let us picture the lunch plate of the future, which would pair a cultured chicken fillet that is grown from a handful of animal cells in a clean bioreactor. And this generally helps us to replicate the taste and the texture of conventional poultry, with a side of fonio and moringa salad. Those are two crops that have been long cultivated in West Africa with certain properties that allow them to be resistant to drought, but also providing an important density of micronutrients. The cultured meat will help deliver familiar protein using far less land and water resources than traditional farming conditions, while the rediscovery of these grains and leaves will help us diversify our diets and support smallhold livelihood. Now, together, this helps us demonstrate how laboratory-born innovation and heritage ingredients can share the same table to build a more resilient, nutritious, and sustainable food system. Ensuring that scientific advances truly benefit society will require, on top of this, an effective bridge between the discovery and the public use. And this is where we see food regulatory science in action and becoming critically important. Robust regulatory frameworks and food innovation are often seen to be in tension, one being the brake, and that's the regulation, and the other being the accelerator, and that's the innovation. In reality, we can resolve this tension. Well-designed, science-based regulations will act as an enabler that will guide for the sustainability of food innovation. Science-based risk assessments will help reach conclusions that characterize the risks and the benefit which may result from the innovative ingredients or from innovative food processes. This is in fact a prerequisite for the formulation of market access decisions that are related to these applications. And science-based regulatory decisions are key mitigators of investor uncertainty. They contribute to building and to maintaining consumer trust, and they constitute an essential currency for any new technology. This is, of course, further amplified when these decisions, so the decisions that are reached about these innovations, are made with the contribution of the international community of scientists under the auspices of the Codex Alimentarius Commission, the international food standard setting body, and of course, with the support of its advisory committees operated by FAO and WHO. In short, science-grounded regulatory decisions are the enabling channels for food innovation to access markets and to address consumers and societal needs. Science-driven solutions help us replace broad reactive controls with more targeted, with more data-rich oversight, which help boost consumer trust and help deliver a more cost-effective, predictable regulatory regime. For example, whole genome sequencing networks, which develop and maintain a repository of the implicated agents in foodborne illness outbreaks, will help investigators spot and possibly link foodborne illness causes in days. And this is, in fact, will help to have recalls of the incriminated foods before illnesses would multiply. And this, of course, will help us save millions in healthcare dollars on top of saving lives. And also, this will help to reduce the impact of food recalls. Artificial intelligence models that contribute to mining past inspection reports and supply chain data contribute to ranking food production facilities by risk. This is what will let us use more limited inspector teams or inspector capacity, focusing this capacity to the highest risk sites and cutting the routine visits, for example, by as much as 30%. And this is, of course, done without compromising safety. Portable analytical solutions such as low-cost PCR and other test kits will give field officers screening and sometimes even laboratory-grade results within hours. And this will help avoid expensive sample shipments and will help to enable on-the-spot decisions in a resource-constrained region. Data-driven traceability pilots, for example, may help support producers as well as regulators to track those suspect food lots in a very short time, for example, in minutes, instead of taking weeks. And this, of course, will enable more precise recalls that protect consumers while preventing the needless destruction of safe products. Building strong, science-driven food regulatory authorities is no longer a nice to have. It is the gatekeeper of both consumer protection and equitable access to tomorrow's food markets. When food regulatory bodies lack the skilled risk assessors, the scientific data, and the tools, including clear data review protocols, two things would happen. Unsafe products can slip through in some jurisdictions, and this, of course, contributes to eroding public trust and also will erode access to safe food products. At the same time, we will be witnessing that innovative foods will be stalling in these markets, and they would, of course, lock those local enterprises and their potential to access a lucrative and high-value trade. Targeted investments in food regulatory science capacity by training staff in food regulatory science disciplines, spanning from food analysis to exposure modeling, by equipping laboratories, by creating a shared environment for evidence databases, will help level the playing field. We know, however, that this is a costly enterprise and a costly endeavor. No single country, especially amongst the low and middle income economies, can realistically fund and staff the full spectrum of food regulatory functions enabled with cutting-edge laboratories, with bioinformatic platforms, and with multidisciplinary expertise that the modern food regulatory oversight actually demands. Rather than duplicating capacity, food regulators, industry, and academia must pool their resources towards the creation of what we consider to be potentially regional centers of excellence in food regulatory science. These centers of excellence can be the home of knowledge, of data. So they will constitute a knowledge hub or a data hub. And these centers of expertise will help us share training programs with standardized risk assessment skills. They would support also the activities of enforcement, while these functions will have, of course, to remain a national and highly localized activity. Public authorities will continue to be the source of authority through a well-established governance and legal framework. Academia would, of course, contribute with research and talent development pipelines, and industry would offer real-world data and potentially co-investment. All this put together will help create a collaborative backbone for a more sustainable and predictable food regulatory regime. These investments are needed for consumers everywhere to be able to receive the same high level of standards of safety, and for small and medium producers to be able to gain access to a predictable and internationally recognized pathway to market for their food products and their food innovations. As a conclusion to this presentation, I hope that through the examples that we shared, that I have made the demonstration, if it needed to be made, that science has repeatedly proven to be the driving force in overcoming the challenges facing our food systems, particularly food safety challenges that may be resulting from a number of drivers of change, such as climate change, such as waste, or the increasing need to provide nutritious foods. Harnessing the contribution of science is absolutely essential to building food systems that are resilient, that are sustainable, and supported by a trusted and enabling food regulatory regime. Once again, very thankful to you and to the organizers for giving me the opportunity to contribute to this event. And I would like to wish you great continued deliberations and a very successful event.
Well, I'm very sure that we are having rounds of applauses all over the countries that are attending the event today. So very big thanks to Professor Godefroy to navigate us through overall socioeconomic impacts of food safety in society and in the agri-food chain, highlight the connection between the new technologies and the traditional knowledge to ensure safe and sustainable food systems, and also to highlight very strongly the importance of science for food control systems and the transformation of decisions based on a predictable path by knowing which risks are being addressed. So very bringing the data and the importance of that to prepare and predict actions. So moving ahead, I will now pass to the second keynote address. I would like to bring Dr. Gyanendra Gongal, the Senior Public Health Officer for the WHO Southeast Asia region, into the stage to elaborate further on science-based food safety standards and food safety risk analysis and the importance of that. So Gongal, over to you.
Thank you very much. It is my great pleasure to highlight the food safety risk analysis principle and science-based food standardization in Codex. And previous speakers, 3S, Sarah, Syed, and Samuel, they help us to understand the importance of risk analysis, which is the foundation of Codex work and food safety, food trade, and food business. So I would like to focus on how Codex works and how scientific advisory bodies help to understand science-based, evidence-based information to develop Codex standards, and also what are the tools and platform for generating, sharing evidence for policy decision. So the theme of the World Food Safety Day, as it was mentioned, science in action. So science is the basis of food safety decision-making, policy-making, and we involve producers, processors, transporters, retailers, and also consumers in the food safety. So we all are risk manager. And that's why it is important to make decisions based on science. And science provides the fundamental basis for food safety. We have Codex Alimentarius Commission, which was established in 1963 by Food and Agriculture Organization and WHO. And it is food law or code. It is a collection of internationally adopted food standards presented in a unified manner. It is science-based, that's why it is universally acceptable. And there is consensus-based decision-making, which ensure responsibility of member states. It is member state-driven organization. We have 188 member states plus European Union as member of Codex Alimentarius Commission. There are dual objectives. One is protecting the health of consumers and facilitating fair practices in food trade. It is important to note that Codex Alimentarius Commission has been recognized by World Trade Organization as an standard-setting organization on food safety. And Codex Alimentarius Commission, which is based in Rome, it coordinates all food standards work, determining priorities and initiating and guiding the preparation of draft standards, finalizing standards as regional or global worldwide standards, amending published standards as appropriate in the light of development. So we have Codex Procedural Manual. We have now 30th edition, and this was released recently. And there are some amendments, particularly related to risk analysis of veterinary drug residue in foods and what are the MRLs. And there are different Codex committees, like we have Codex Committee on cereals, pulses, and legumes that was re-established as vertical committee. So here it is important to understand that there is executive committee which meets twice a year. We have annual session of Codex Alimentarius Commission which happens once a year, either in Geneva or Rome. So this time it is going to happen in Rome in November. And we have Codex Secretariat maintained by FAO and WHO. There are horizontal or general committee, which is applicable to different commodities. So we have 10 general committees. I just want to mention here that general principle that Codex Committee meeting was held last week in France, and Thailand is going to organize Codex Committee on Contaminated Food that is going to happen in last week of this month in collaboration with host country, that is the Netherlands. And we have 5 commodity committee. It is based on request of member states. And there are some committees which finish their job, and that's why it is not working. So it is inactive. In addition to that, if necessary, we have ad hoc intergovernmental task force. So right now there is nothing. In the past it was AMR. And here, according to the Codex Alimentarius Commission, we have coordinating committee. So we have 6 regions, Codex regions. For Asia, we have 2. One is Codex Committee for Asia. It was established in 1976, and we have 24 members. And 23rd CC Asia meeting is going to happen in China. And there is another Codex region, that is North America and Southwest Pacific. And Fiji is leading that NASWAC, and Japan is leading CC Asia. So NASWAC have Australia, New Zealand, United States of America, and Pacific Island countries as member. And there was a meeting of NASWAC in Fiji this year, 17th one. And in that way, our member states, they can participate in regional as well as global these meetings. So how Codex standards are developed? It is a good, there is step procedure. So there is step 1 to step 8. So any member states or subsidiary committees, they can propose any Codex standards, like Bhutan and Nepal, they propose Codex standard for large cardamom. So once it is proposed and agreed, then discussion document is developed. And after that, we develop a project document, and that initiate the step 1. And then there are different steps. So it was discussed at the regional level as well as in Codex committees. And then it should go from step 1 to step 8. So to conclude, we have to go through various processes. So it may take 2 to 4 years, depending upon activity of subsidiary committees. And here we also have fast track mechanism that we may try to use the relevant Codex committee to accelerate the development of Codex standards. And then from draft text, we can avoid step 6 and 7, then we can conclude in step 8. There are many Codex standards, guideline, and code of practices, as you are mentioned by Sarah. So this is the figure I'm just presenting here. Maximal limit for 303 food additives. We have maximum residual limit for pesticide residue covering 294 pesticides and different crops, so it can be used. 610 YMRL for 75 veterinary drugs. So having standards that are science-based makes them globally acceptable. And how different the scientific body, they help to develop standards. So we have joined FAO WHO Food Safety Scientific Advice Committee Program. So we have JEFCA, that is Joint Expert Committee on Food Additives, and it helps to evaluate the risk associated with food additives and residues of veterinary drug, contaminants, and natural toxin in food and feed. So food and feed, that is also important, that animal feed, ultimately we produce milk, meat, and eggs through food chain, we may get those contaminants in our body. And second one is joint expert meeting on microbiological risk assessment. It is dealing with basically associated risks with bacterial pathogen, viruses, and parasites in food, and it helps us to provide scientific advice necessary for the development of key guidance on hygienic practices. And we have joined meeting on pesticide residue. It is basically dealing with pesticide in food and animal feed, which are used to determine what level can be found in food and what level are safe for consumption. So based on exposure, dietary exposure analysis. And how these scientific input are given to FAOW's expert by expert committee. So we have JEFCA that provides advice to Codex Committee on Food Additives, Codex Committee on Contaminant in Food, Codex Committee on Residue of Veterinary Drugs in Food. GMPR is advising Codex Committee on Pesticide Residue. GEMRA is advising Codex Committee on Food Hygiene. So that is the way we control microbial contamination. And there is another one, Joint Expert Committee on meeting on nutrition that provide advice to Codex Committee on Nutrition and Food for Special Dietary Use, like infants and pregnant women and immunocompromised population. So there are also ad hoc consultation. As I mentioned, it is to review certain issues like non-typhoidal salmonella species in pork meat. That is an example. So risk analysis, definitely risk assessment, risk management, and risk communication. It is interactive process, and risk communication is the main component which may happen in individual case like risk assessment, risk management, and risk communication. So risk assessment is science-based, risk management is policy-based, and risk communication is to communicate to consumer as well as to societies. And how to determine if chemical in food are a health risk. So chemical risk assessment, hazard identification, what effects are caused by the chemicals. And then we go parallelly, hazard characterization and exposure assessment. So those response assessment and how much of the chemicals are people exposed to. And then we have risk categorization. We have to determine risk of adverse health outcome in the exposed population. And how risk analysis is managed. We have risk assessment, like I'm giving an example of GMPR, pesticide residue, and that is science and evidence-based and assessment and advice. They provide advice. And another one is risk management. It is Codex Committee on Pesticide Residue and member states, they have to reinforce regulation and control. And we should have dialogue with all stakeholders, trader, consumer, as well as those private sector, so that it will be implemented. Now, it is important to mention here the statement from German philosopher Ludwig Feuerbach, who said in 1863 that man is what he eats. So why is it so critical to monitor diets? We have 149 million children. They have stunted growth, which may be linked to deficiency of nutrient as well as microelements. And total diet studies, it has two major objectives. Either it is dietary intake of beneficial substances, that is nutrients, or it is the exposure to harmful substances, that is contaminant hazards. And WHO recommends TDS as an essential part of National Food Safety Monitoring Surveillance System. The main aim is to assess chronic dietary exposure to food chemicals by analyzing commonly consumed food. So like cooked food, ready to consume food, that is analyzed. So, and food consumption data needs to be generated as an initial stage, and data from TDS is to used to manage food safety risk and develop intervention to minimize those risks. And it is complementary to routine monitoring of raw agricultural commodities. And it also helps to define trends in the level of chemical hazards and nutrient in the diet over time. So we have low level of chemicals in food. So over a period of time, it may have cumulative effects. So that is important. And how it is done, dietary exposure, we have contaminant and food. So here we have to understand that there is concentration. C means concentration of chemical in the food, and YOF means amount of food that is consumed. If it is single food or if it is multiple food, then we have to analyze for each this food exposure. And dietary exposure assessment is done through total diet studies. So here, I want to give example like tea. Tea may contain high concentration of this chemical contaminant, and that means it may have higher concentration, means higher exposure. And similarly, we have rice or wheat flour, we may consume in large quantity, and so quantity also is important to understand here. And we try to calculate like 60 kg as body weight, and that we have to keep in mind. So it is not moving. Yeah, it is not moving. So can you move this slide? Oh yeah. Okay. So now it is 60 kg body weight, and we try to understand how to do this exposure, dietary exposure analysis. And 90% of total diet should be included in this analysis. Otherwise, it may have wrong calculation. So here we have international program on chemical safety and dietary exposure assessment framework. We may have screening method, try to identify and prioritize issues, and we can have more refined intake exposure assessment. So the first estimate, it is cost effective, and but if you want to improve food consumption data quality and chemical concentration data quality, then we need to invest more. So in that way, we can refine the process. And how to conduct total diet studies? Every country has its dietary pattern and method of food preparation. Like imadasi in Bhutan, we have nasi goreng in Indonesia. So each country, they have to decide which is important. And conduct a survey on the amount of food consumed by individual in each cohort, including food preparation details. So menu we have to see, and how it is cooked, and cooked food we try to use for analysis. And it may be raw food if it is vegetables or some other things. And collect and prepare food that is typically consumed in that society. And measure the chemical of interest in those prepared food. Like if it is fish, we may go for methyl mercury. And if it is rice, it may be arsenic. So I am giving just example. Estimate dietary exposure to a chemical, compare exposure estimate with the health-based guidance level. So that is reference value. We have the Global Environment Monitoring System, Food Chemical Database, and this was established in 1976, and it has this database since 2012. There are two major purposes: dietary exposure assessment and standard setting processes. And WHO GAMES Food Database, which tracks the occurrence of chemical in food, contains approximately 9 million plus analytical data. And we can go through this web page, and it is understandable that we try to get those information, not by country, but as aggregate data. And Codex uses GAMES Food Database to establish maximum limit for chemicals in food. So there is also another system, Global Monitoring Program, which is run by United Nations Environment Program, biomonitoring human exposure to chemicals. So persistent lipophilic chemicals found in human milk are preferentially stored in mother's adipose tissue. So this chemical contaminant, they usually like this adipose tissue. And human milk is tested for residue of environmental contaminants to evaluate associated risk. And residue of many banned persistent organic pollutant under Stockholm Convention, bisphenol A, heavy metals, and mycotoxin persist in women's breast milk. And 1951, DDT became the first environmental pollutant found in human milk. It is not biodegradable. Even in Pacific Island country, it is used for vector control, public health, as well as in agriculture. Now it is banned worldwide. What are the key messages? Science is fundamental to food safety. And if it is not safe, it is not food. Food safety is everyone's business, as it was the first theme of the World Food Safety event, which we initiated. And there is no science without data that we have to understand. So it is evidence-based, science-based. That's why it is universally acceptable. There are many scientific disciplines behind food safety. So microbiology, virology, and many other disciplines. And we should also try to focus on these good laboratory practices and how to better manage data, which is confidential as well as acceptable. And education is key, because food safety, we have to deal with different people in different languages, and we have different socio-cultural behavior as well as food habit. And everyone is a risk manager. So these are the messages I want to deliver. Now we'll try to understand how other international organizations think about food safety standards and codex.
Thank you very much, Gongo, for another very informative presentation. Very good to get an overview of the Codex Alimentarius mandate, structures, committees, and demonstrate how relevant data that comes from science is key to formulate the text, the standards, practices, and guidelines. And also navigating us through risk analysis procedures and how assessment and management practices are done in practical aspects, and also highlighting total diet studies, dietary exposure, and how this connects to the food safety risks we have, which also matches with the previous keynote address, and also highlighting the relevance of having databases and sources of information to allow us to analyze these trends. With that said, we are going to close our keynote session, and I'm very sure that we are eager to hear more from our experts and our panelists for today. And for that, I would like to hand over the floor to our moderator for the panel discussion, Dr. Sridhar Dharmapuri, Senior Food Safety and Nutrition Officer at the Food and Agriculture Organization of the United Nations for Asia and Pacific Office. So, Dr. Sridhar, over to you.
Thank you, Jessica, and good afternoon to all of you from the regional office in Bangkok. We heard already from Dr. Godofay and then Gyanendra on the importance of science and how science is the foundation of food safety. And indeed, we also saw that there is a very knowledgeable audience, judging from their responses to the Slido quiz. Most of them got almost everything right. So it's indeed very opportune that this year's World Food Safety Day focuses on science and science in action. We are living in a time when global multilateral institutions, like all those that we represent, are being challenged. And it's important that we double down on the importance of science and how good science and research underpin food safety and standards, and they lead better food, safer food, and more nutritious food for everybody. So to elaborate this and more, we have a top-class panel of very experienced scientists, researchers, risk assessors, and regulators. And they're coming from across the Asia Pacific region. You will see them that they are the geographical representation is across the entire region. And we thank them for taking the time to be with us today. I am personally very thrilled to moderate this panel, and I'm sure all of us will learn a lot of lessons and good practices from their experiences. So without further ado, let's just dive in and go to our experts. So our first expert whom I'll be asking the first question is Dr. Debabrata Kanungo, who is a member of the joint FAO-WHO meeting on pesticide residues, which is an expert body which looks at the requirements of risk assessment of pesticides residues and provides independent scientific advice to Codex, the CCPR, the Codex Committee on Pesticide Residues, as well as FAO and WHO, and of course countries. So Dr. Kanungo, our first question to you is, and sorry, just let me also say, we will try and do at least 2 rounds of questions. So I'll go to each panelist and then go a second time. Hopefully we'll have time for a third round, but and in the meantime, all those of you who are listening online, if you have a question to the expert, please put in the question in the chat. We will read it out for you. Please also indicate to which panelist you're addressing this question. So sorry, so let me go back to Dr. Kanungo again. So as a member of the JMPR, how are contaminants in foods prioritized? And how is scientific data used for determining maximum limits or maximum residual limits to ensure consumer protection and fair practices in trade? Over to you, Dr. Kanungo.
Thank you, Dr. Dharampuri. In fact, thanks to Dr. Gangal and you both giving me a chance to be a panelist here. Your question looks like to me are 2 parts. The part is how contaminants in food are prioritized. The second part is how scientific data are used for determining ML and MRL to ensure consumer health protection and fair practices in trade. Coming to the first part of the question, the priority usually means what? Priorities is given to these expert committees like JMPR, JECFA for doing analysis for the fast track and do the standard setting. So it was usually given by the different relevant codex committees, like for pesticide, it is CCPR. But how they are also do this giving priority, the contaminants that pose significant health risk, such as cancer or any toxins which are present, they are given priority. The contaminants also found more frequently or in higher concentration in different components of food are prioritized. The contaminants which are found to be having impact on the vulnerable population like children, pregnant women, or immunocompromised individuals are also given the highest risk. During surveillance program and by the country and the monitoring data, so sometimes they provide the insight into the occurrence of the contaminants. If that happens, the priority are also given to that. And from international database like WHO, Codex, FAO, and some national monitoring agencies like EFSA, even in our country, in India, if some information is given, information is available that a particular contaminant or particular residue is going on and it is required, then the priority is given. Sometimes contaminants which have got the impact on international trade, such as mycotoxin or pesticide residues, they are given prioritized to ensure that market access and the fair trade practice. Many times now the science is there and there is advanced analytical methods are coming and suddenly found that there is emerging contaminants. They also trigger for prioritization. Coming to your second part of the question, the ML or maximum limit are fixed for the contaminants and also the food additives. Whereas the MRL, they are fixed, their maximum residual limit, they are fixed for the pesticides in agri-commodities or agri-food and also veterinary drugs residues in the edible portion of the animals. The methodology almost remain the same. It is based on the science-based risk assessment methodology, which has got about 4 components. The hazard identification, already Dr. Gongal has given this detail. Hazard identification, hazard contamination, exposure assessment, and risk characterization. In hazard identification, usually all the relevant toxicological data are evaluated by the experts, and in the hazard characterization, they try to find out the NOAEL, that is no observed adverse effect level. So from the NOAEL, they find out the acceptable daily intake or acute reference dose. The NOAEL is the highest dose at which no adverse effects are observed in toxicological studies in animal, not in the human being. Whereas the acceptable daily intake are derived from this figure of NOAEL by dividing invariably by a safety factor, usually 100, but sometimes it varies from 25 to maybe 3000 depending on the quality of the data. ADI is the dose that represents the amount of a substance if that can be ingested daily over a lifetime without any appreciable health risk. Similarly, acute reference dose is the dose which is again found out from the NOAEL. It is if it is taken whether a single dose or within 24 hours, it doesn't create any problem. Then the maximum residual limit or ML, the maximum residual limit of pesticides, they are find out by undertaking the residue trials, adopting the good agricultural practice or good veterinary practice. And the extent of contaminations are determined through surveillance program of monitoring the program. All these things, when it comes, then the important component which Dr. Gongal has very well explained is the exposure assessment, dietary exposure assessment. How much of the pesticide or the contaminants are there in the particular diet, single diet or various diet, how much is exposed, exposed the human being or consumer is exposed. Based on the consumption pattern and dietary intake data or the quantity of food, the probabilistic models are used to estimate exposure in various population group. Dr. Gongal has already shown that particular picture. Having known all these things, then we go for the risk characterization, which is made by analyzing whether daily consumption of residue or contaminants in particular food or a group of food is within the acceptable intake. If it is within the acceptable intake, acceptable daily intake or acute reference dose, then there is no public health impact. And also with those respective MRL and ML, there is no negative trade impact. Thank you very much. I hope I could answer your questions.
Indeed, very well, Dr. Kanungo. You walked us through the process that goes into the setting of MLs and MRLs, and how you actually prioritize. So thank you very much for sharing that information. So for the next question, we'll go to Aya-san, Dr. Aya Orito-Nozawa, who's the Associate Director at the International Standards Office in Japan at the Ministry of Agriculture, Forestry and Fisheries. So she is a very familiar face to all of us who are online here today. And thank you, Aya-san, for being here. So, and you're also leading the CC Asia as the coordinator. Japan is the coordinator for the Codex Committee for Asia. So how do you see the role of CC Asia in promoting science-based decision-making, particularly member states? I know you already support projects in the region. So how do you proceed in that direction? Over to you, Aya-san.
Okay. Thank you, Sridhar, for your kind, kind introduction about me. And my name is Aya Orito-Nozawa, and happy World Food Safety Day. Thank you, FAO and the WHO regional offices for having me as a panelist. Sridhar mentioned, Japan is currently serving as the regional coordinator for Asia in Codex. So I am honored to participate in this webinar as a representative in that capacity. It's a great pleasure to be part of this important occasion. Regarding the question from Sridhar, I believe CC Asia has two main important roles in promoting science-based decision-making in our region. So the one key role of CC Asia is a platform for knowledge sharing and mutual learning among members. I believe that CC Asia is a valuable space for ASEAN 24 members to share experiences and science knowledge for food safety and quality. Many food safety and nutrition challenges are shared across members, and some of them may not always get enough attention at the global level. A session of CC Asia has some agendas regarding food safety and quality in the region and Codex work relevant to the region. So these agendas provide members with the opportunity to learn from one another, which can really help strengthen our national systems. And I believe that informal communication as well as formal one among members is also important. These communications allow us to form strong, coordinated, and harmonized regional views. In this regard, I would like to emphasize the importance of regional discussion prior to the Codex meetings and encourage members to join them. This makes our voices more effective in global discussions, especially when it comes to developing international standards, and will contribute effectively to global Codex discussions. And the second key role is, I believe, enhancing regional contributions to Codex work. The Codex is a typical example of science in action. So science-based standards require robust data. So in this regard, I believe CC Asia has great potential. Asia is a region rich in diversity with varied cultures and climates and agricultural practices and food production systems. There also remain differences in levels of development among countries. So bearing these challenges in mind, I believe it is essential to continue efforts to develop Codex standards reflecting the realities of ASEAN region and based on science and evidence, especially if we can make use of this diversity to generate more data, and if we can enhance our capacities to generate more robust data, we can make stronger contribution to Codex work. And this effort will also contribute to harmonizing national food standards and regulations in Asian countries with Codex standards. So overall, CC Asia not just a forum for discussion, but I believe that it's a driver of cooperation and progress in science-based food safety decision across Asia. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Aya-san. I think that summed it up pretty well. Science is the key driver for standard setting, and it plays a big role, particularly in Asia, which is the world's most heavily populated region, as we know. So from from Japan, now we go over to Australia and to Dr. Steve Crossley from the Food Standards Australia and New Zealand. First of all, Steve, thank you for joining us at a very early hour from the United Kingdom. We hope you had a few strong cups of coffee already. And as we realize, you've had a lot of experience, almost 38 years experience in food standards and risk assessment in Australia. So how do you see the challenges of developing consensus on Codex standards, which is, I think, a right point to take from Aya Science response, given that Asia is a country with significant differences between the economic status of countries. So given differences in technical capacities in the various countries and members of Codex, how do you see the challenges of developing consensus on Codex texts and standards? Over to you, Steve.
Yeah, thank you, Sridhar. And first of all, I should clarify that I don't work anymore for Food Standards Australia, New Zealand. I'm retired, although I did spend many years working for the Australian Food Regulator. So in this regard, I'm speaking for myself as an individual in answering this question. I'd like to also, first of all, just thank the FAO and WHO for inviting me to participate in this important event. And I understand the questions around developing consensus of Codex standards, particularly for countries with limited capabilities to adopt those standards. So I think there are really three main aspects related to technical capacity to developing consensus and the subsequent implementation of those standards into domestic legislation. And I'll just touch upon those three standards. First of all, for low and medium income countries, limited resources can constrain the active participation in Codex meetings, electronic working groups, and other related activities. And it also makes it difficult for them to keep ahead of new developments in Codex, such as new foods and production systems. Of course, the FAO and WHO have a Codex Trust Fund, now in its second iteration, which is sought to facilitate the participation of developing countries in Codex. So that's the first key point. The second one is that technical capacity and resource limitations also may not allow the generation and submission of supporting data, such as occurrence concentration data, or food consumption data into relevant Codex standards by countries with more limited means and capacities. And the third aspect I'd just like to highlight is in terms of the implementation of Codex standards at the national level, that some low-income countries do not have the legislative framework for implementing Codex standards, while many other developing countries directly reference Codex standards as the basis of their national food standards legislation. So, and just to contrast that as a generalization with many developed countries, many developed countries do have their own, have a greater capacity to do their own national risk assessments, and so often set their own national food standards frequently different to that of the Codex Alimentarius. So in conclusion, with regard to the question on the limitations set by technical capacity, I'd say that it does limit particularly the ability of low and medium size economies to participate and influence the Codex process. Thank you. Back to you, Sridhar.
Thank you. Thank you, Steve. And thank you for sharing some of the key messages on how we could actually address the problem of countries having different capacities in the region in being able to participate and develop consensus on Codex standards. So from a person who worked extensively with a food regulators and standards agency, we now go to a professional organization. So Dr. Atul Upadhyay, who is very active in the nutrition and nutrition labeling field from Nepal. So Atul, the question to you is, you of course attended meetings of the Codex Committee on Nutrition and Food for Special Dietary Use in the past. So as you are a citizen of a low and income country, lower middle income country yourself, what do you see are the key concerns for countries regarding Codex standard settings for infant foods, and especially in the context of the globalization of trade? Over to you.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. Good morning, good afternoon from Nepal, and thank you, Dr. Sridhar, and thank you, FAO-WHO, for inviting me to this discussion. Well, from my experience participating in Codex Committee for Nutrition and Foods for Specially Dietary Users, I've observed that while the standards are grounded in science, many LMICs face structural challenges in participating effectively. Now, first, and as Dr. Steve Crossley rightly said, there's often limited representation and capacity. Many LMICs can't regularly attend Codex meetings or even submit comments on the draft text. Now, this will affect their ability to shape Codex standards that align with their national public health priorities, especially for infant foods. That's one. Secondly, in the context of trade globalization, now Codex standards for infant food can sometimes be driven more by market access concerns than by child health. Now, this will again lead to the challenges in balancing, such as breastfeeding protection, affordability, and cultural appropriateness. And the third and the most important thing that I have felt is the lack of national data on nutrient needs, dietary patterns, and consumption risks in many LMIs. Now, this will weaken their ability to negotiate in Codex meetings, for context-specific standards or to justify alternatives. Now, I think to improve all this, there's a real need to strengthen LMIC participation. And there's where we need to provide technical support, data systems, and regional coordination. I think only then Codex standards become truly representative and supportive of both global trade and local nutrition needs. Thank you, and over.
Thank you, Dr. Upadhyay. So all good messages for everyone who's listening, including both FAO and WHO, on how we actually improve the capacity of participation, particularly from LMICs in Codex discussion. So from here, now we go to the Singapore Food Agency, from where we are joined by Dr. Er Jun Sheng, who is the branch head of the Risk Assessment and Communication Department for the National Center for Food Science. So, Dr. Cheng, there are two questions for you, actually, both at the same time. So one is, please explain the role of your department at the National Center for Food Science in the context of its work for the Singapore Food Agency. And second, you're actually also doing total diet studies. So tell us a little more about how it is introduced as well as your priorities. We already heard from Gyanendra on its utility for food safety. So can you just tell us also how it's done at the country level? Over to you.
All right, thank you, Sridhar, for the kind introduction, and good morning and good afternoon to everyone. So first, it's really an honor to be part of this panel. So I really want to thank WHO and FAO for the invite. Right, so I'll just touch on your first question, which is the introduction of my work of the National Center of Food Science and also my department in the Risk Assessment and Communications. Right, so to put it simply, the National Center for Food Science is the scientific arm of the Singapore Food Agency. And specifically, we are in charge of answering a lot of the science, safety-related science needed for the SFA to develop its policies and standards. And also the testing as well. So in the National Center for Food Science, or NCFS for short, we have actually 4 departments, right? The Food Science and Rapid Response Department is where all our scientists doing the laboratory work and also the experts specializing in the various fields of hazards. That's where they're housed in. The name Rapid Response comes from our investments in new technologies that are for rapid response, such as our mobile laboratory, and also a lot of the whole genome sequencing methods that was presented before, right? Which we actually deploy on site for emergencies and also for large scale events. And then we also have a department that focuses on the research and exposure science, and also a department focusing on laboratory development. Right, my department is actually the smallest amongst the four, but we play a very important role in for acting as the bridge to translate the science coming from NCFS to the various divisions within Singapore Food Agency, so that it actually gets worked into our policies. And also, we do a lot of the public comms, the coordination of the public communications, together with our other divisions as well. On top of that, and we also do, our department is also in charge of the safety assessments of new food ingredients, food additives, and increasingly also medicinal products that are being used in foods. Right, so that's in essence what we actually do. So going on to your question on the Todadad study, thank you very much for the question, and I think it's it's an honor that you give us a question because it's the first time we actually conduct the Todadad study. But before that, I want to first emphasize that we do actually have a comprehensive food safety system, and TDS was just an additional tool that we added recently to our arsenal to give us complementary insights for risk assessments. Right, so it gives us an unbiased assessment of what foods are contributing to our exposures. And in the future, it also gives us an evaluation of how well we do in terms of our risk management measures. And what is very important is that it's actually a very convenient study. It's recommended by WHO. So we can actually quote this study in our international platforms, which is very fundamental to harmonizing all our standards. So we embark on our TDS, it's because we recognize a few things. Right, so first thing, we recognize that our consumption and our food preparation patterns aren't quite the same as the rest of the world. I give you a few examples. Right, so locally, we do actually have a lot of stir frying of our foods, even vegetables. We do a lot of stir frying, meats, we do stir frying. And that involves the use of a lot of oils that is quite different from the Western part of the world. And also, I want to highlight our hawker culture, which is a very important culture in Singapore. It has become a UNESCO heritage, and that also influences a lot of our consumption patterns and how we prepare our foods. Right, and also the local consumption of several unique kind of bakery products because of our kind of Peranakan culture, the consumption of kuehs. I mean, in locally we call it kuehs. I don't think there's actually an English name for it, so that actually shows how localized this kind of consumption is. And also certain policies that we have rolled out in Singapore, for example, the consumption of whole grains because of our declaration of war against diabetes and other chronic kind of diseases. Right. And also we do recognize that our food supply is also not quite the same as the rest of the world. For example, Singapore, it's being such a small country, we import more than 90% of our food. And increasingly also we are promoting the growing of local foods, but because of our very small land space in Singapore, we use a lot of, we are moving towards use of a lot of high tech, a lot of urban farming, and possibly even introduce new types of foods as well. And together that actually leads to introduction of new types of potentially introduce new types of contamination, such as heavy metals, certain pesticide use. It's not very much the same as the rest of the world. And also increasingly, we are doing a lot of stockpiling, and it could potentially introduce contamination associated with storage conditions or use of certain kind of chemicals. All right, so that actually kind of explains a lot of the unique context of Singapore. And also we recognize that we need to refine our risk assessments because increasingly for food supply considerations, we now need to actually assess also the impacts that it has on our limited food supply. Right, so essentially just to sum up, we recognize that we need additional science that is contextualized to Singapore so that we can support the prioritization of our risk management efforts for chemicals. Yep. So over to you, Sridhar.
Thank you, Dr. Cheng, for sharing that experience. I think that's something which other countries would immensely benefit from, and also given your unique situation as a heavily food importing country, but still you're in the midst of Asia, so a lot to learn from there. So we'll now go into a second round. So we'll need to conclude this in about 20 minutes. So I'll request all panelists to keep their answers brief and to the point, and also try to incorporate a couple of questions which I see on the chat. So we'll go back to Dr. Kanungo now. So one question for you, Dr. Kanungo, is what do you see as the challenges in the current data landscape? Because we've spoken of the lack of capacities or low capacities in some countries to actually have that capacity to share data, generate and share good quality data. So you could probably throw some light on that. And also there's a question on the chat from Aklanta Kalika, who's asking about how Indian food safety standards have evolved and how are we doing in terms of harmonization with Codex. So you could probably throw some light on both aspects in your response. Over to you, Dr. Kanungo. You're muted, sir. You have to unmute yourself.
Thank you. The first thing is the challenge is the data gap. There is a limited availability of high quality data for certain contaminants, residues, and food products. There is also insufficient data on regional dietary consumption pattern, which are essentially for the exposure assessment. Even data are available, there is heterogeneity due to lack of standardized methodologies and data collection and analysis. There is variability in the sampling protocol, analytical techniques, and reporting formats between countries. There is a limited research in newly identified contaminants and their impact on health and trade. All these reasons may be due to resource limitations because there is inadequate funding and infrastructure for food monitoring programs, insufficient trained personnel because ours is a very big country. Looking to the size of the country, we have insufficient trained personnel to handle the data collection, analysis, and interpretation. The major thing is the reluctance to share the data, especially in the ASEAN countries, due to concern over the intellectual property, trade impacts, and a lack of trust in data sharing mechanism. I think these ASEAN countries need to share this data. And fragmentation of the data sources, making it challenging to compile and analyze the comprehensive. There is a limited adoption of advanced tools such as AI. We are yet to adopt those things. So what is your second question?
There's a question on the chat from Aklanta
Yes.
Kalita, who wanted to know how Indian food safety standards have evolved and how is it doing in terms of harmonization with Codex?
Okay. Our methodology is almost harmonized with the Codex system. We make the standard fixed and harmonized with the Codex. All the methodology, including except the dietary exposure assessment, which may be little different from other places, but our methodology almost same. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Kanungo. From here now we go now to Ayasan again. So Ayasan, you're going to lead us to CC Asia in China. So tell us from your perspective as the coordinator, if you think regional Codex standards are necessary and CC Asia should be focusing more on them, or what do you think is the way forward with regional standards?
Okay, thank you, Sridhar, for asking me the second question. And yes, the next session of CC Asia will be held probably this year. And I'm very honored to be a chair for it. And I look forward to meeting Codex Asia members in person and to exchanging and sharing our views about the food safety challenges we face. And yes, as for regional standards, I do believe they are sometimes necessary So while Codex mainly develops global standards, regional standards can be very useful when there are food product or food safety concerns that are specific to a certain part of the world. So in Asia, for example, we have many traditional foods that are widely consumed in the region, but not necessarily traded globally. A regional standard helps ensure safety and quality for these foods, and it can also facilitate inter-regional trade. And most of the regional standards in Asia are commodity standards. For example, products using soybean and seaweed already have their Asian regional standards. And the regional standards for quick frozen dumpling has been now progressing. The other new works for regional standards may be proposed by Asian member countries. So regional standards should still follow Codex procedures and be based on sound science or robust evidence, but they can give us a chance to respond to regional needs while staying within the Codex framework. Thank you.
Thank you, Aya-san. So we look forward to very engaging CC Asia in China in about 4 months' time, 3 months' time. So now we go over again to Steve Crossley. So before I go ask him the question, I just wanted to respond briefly to a question on the chat, which is from Adam Manik. He actually wanted to ask Steve on CTF funding. Please, what I would suggest is to please send an email either to FAO or WHO, either to Gyanendra or to Jessica or to myself, and we can answer some questions on CTF because that's for a different capacity building purpose and not exactly for looking at funding multiple food control agencies. So it's a slightly different issue here. So I'll just now go back to Steve and ask him that how is Australia when he was with FSCNZ, how was Australia generating evidence-based data for Codex standard setting, and how can countries actually access dietary exposure and contaminant data internationally? Over to you, Steve.
Okay, thank you, Sridhar. Yeah, Australia generates monitoring data for microbiological and chemical hazards in food. And this is done at several levels, both by governments at the federal and the state level, and also by the food industry as part of their quality control systems. In addition, Australia's undertaken total data studies, used to be called market basket surveys. They've been undertaking total data studies since 1971, and that includes the monitoring for contaminants, pesticides, and veterinary drug residues, nutrients, packaging, migration chemicals, and POPs. Quantitative food consumption data are also generally generated periodically for adults and children as part of the Australian National Nutrition Surveys. So these data are normally, these occurrence concentration data are normally uploaded to the Global Environmental Monitoring System, the Food Contamination Monitoring and Assessment Program, otherwise commonly referred to as GEMS, which was covered by a previous speaker, which is a WHO program which has been operating since 1976. So anyone interested in Australian data for contaminants and for the occurrence in food, perhaps should look there in the first instance. But Australia also provides its food consumption data, and they're included as part of the FAO WHO Chronic Individual Food Consumption Database, which is used by GECFA for its dietary exposure assessments. And this database contains consumption data for 2 or more days to better represent chronic dietary exposure. In addition, there's also the FAO WHO GIFT data tool, the Global Individual Food Consumption Data. And that's an open access online platform containing details of national individual food consumption data, including the Australian data that aims to contribute to evidence-based decision-making for food safety professionals more broadly. So in conclusion, in terms of accessing contaminant data, dietary exposure data, both for Australia and other countries globally, I would put them in the direction of those FAO/WHO database and database tools that I've referred to. Thank you. Back to you, Sridhar.
Thank you, Steve. And indeed, I hope all participants have taken note. Those databases that he spoke about contain a wealth of information and data which can be used for standard setting and also just for information and knowledge of people who are interested in food safety. So we'll now go back to Atul again for his point of view from a professional organization. So Atul, I'll also try to incorporate one of the questions that are there on the QA. So one is that you, as a representative of a professional organization, how do you see the role of the organization and also of the private sector in implementing science-based food standards? And is there an example that you could provide or any experience that you could share from your long-standing experience? Because one of the questions in the chat actually mentions they're asking for some information on infant formula and the standards associated with that. Over to you, Atul.
Thank you, Sridhar. Thank you once again for this question. I mean, well, I think implementing Codex standards is not just the responsibility of governments. It requires strong engagement from both a professional organization as well as the private sector. In Nepal, I belong to Nepal Food Scientist and Technologist Association, which I am currently the immediate past president and the chief advisor. And we have been playing a key role in translating Codex standards into practical tools and trainings. We worked closely with national authorities to provide input during regulatory revision. NEFOSTA, our organization, is one of the committee of standard setting bodies. So this is how we work. And we have also helped develop several guidelines, organized public awareness, even during the food safety. In fact, we started the food safety celebration since 2009. And this is our 17th National Food Safety celebration that we are doing. Now, also, the other example that I would like to highlight is our collaboration with the subnational offices, where our team is supporting both provincial and local governments to develop food safety system policies and programs. Along with that, we organize awareness campaigns, not only for consumers, youth, and school college students, but also for the food manufacturers and food business owners. Now this will help not only with the regulatory compliance, but also in building consumer trust in safety and nutritional value of products. I'll give you one more example. While I was supporting a private sector on using the Codex standards, now that helped like there is a certain nutrition labeling guidelines, standards set up by Codex, that helped them to design the product, one, but also it improved the export. It helped to export these products to other countries where they are very much dependent on the Codex standards. So that is what I think. And I think in an essence, if I would like to say that, coming back to the infant food, is that when Codex standards was set in Germany in the Nutrition Committee meeting, when we came back to Nepal, we advocated government to change the act, which was based on the old Codex, the infant formula milk Codex standard, which has been revised several times. So we asked the government to change that, which has now been tabled in the ministry and is going to the House very soon. And finally, what I would like to stress here is that when professional bodies, innovators, and regulators, when they work together, Codex standards move from paper to practice. And this is very important. And this is where the impact truly begins. And thank you once again for this question, Sridhar. Over to you.
Indeed, Atul. So that's where, when it comes to the private sector and innovators, that's where, as they say, the rubber hits the road. And that's where the results of food standards actually need to show up. So I think a very good way to conclude that part of from the professional organization's point of view. So we'll go on to the final question in this panel, and this will be, of course, to Dr. Cheng. And a couple of things I just wanted to mention. There were a question on the Mad Honey standard. I think Gyanendra has already addressed that. There was another question on the chat, and this was from Jambe Dorji on field testing using portable PCR and biosensors. I think, again, you can contact either FAO WHO on email, and I think we'll be happy to give you some of the links and information that we have. So I'll go over now to Dr. Cheng for one final question. So Dr. Cheng, one of the things with risk assessment and risk analysis, and we heard it from the presentations earlier as well, it's a fairly complex issue. So it's not easy to communicate about it to the layperson. So how does Singapore Food Agency and also your institution department work on demystifying this? How do you make it kind of simpler so that people can understand? Over to you.
Thank you, Sridhar. And yeah, it's a very interesting question. All right, so Dr. Atu has talked about partnership earlier on. So I think partnership, to us, I think partnership is key. To be really frank, I don't think we are very good at demystifying risk assessments for consumers. And as you mentioned, it's actually a very complex kind of topic. So what we do is that we actually partner others who are experts at communication. So I give an example. So a while back, we actually have this Mythbuster YouTube series where we actually partner with a content producer, Just Keep Thinking. So to educate consumers on food labeling and providing a more in-depth look into the science of food safety. So we are partnering them not just for the outreach, but also to tap on their expertise or their specialized communicators to explain these complex topics in a manner that is relatable to our audience, which in this particular case is the younger and more social media savvy generation. So currently, we are still continuing to partner a lot of these content producers on YouTube and social media, and for various other initiatives as well. Right, and so for the older generation, we also partner with the Civil Generation Office. All right, so that is to actually reach out to the older folks who generally they are not actually tapped onto the social media, and so and it's pretty much a vulnerable group that it's hard to reach. Right, so the Civil Generation Office actually has a lot of volunteers who know these elderly folks personally, and they know what appeals to them emotionally and what are the messages that are more suitable to them. So what we do is that we actually reach out to them. We actually try to pass on the content or actually educate this group of volunteers so that they can actually pass on these messages to the vulnerable group of the population. And that's how we actually reach out to the older folks. For the more educated so-called retirees also, I mean, we do actually conduct workshops with them. And from there, they also have their own WhatsApp chat groups that they do spread our messages around. And I think that's how we do that. So partnership is really the key. Thank you. Over to you, Sridhar.
Thank you, Dr. Cheng. And I think it's a good way to end this panel, because one of the things he definitely emphasized is on getting the news from the right source. And in this case, it's the SFA. So they start with YouTube videos and then they go through all the networks of civil society and private sector organizations. I think that's a good message for everyone who is online to take back, because messaging is important, but also getting it from the right source and getting it right is equally important. So on that note, I think we can conclude this panel. We could first, I think it's wonderful to have all of you. Thank you for all taking the time and sharing your knowledge and your experience. I think participants definitely go away from this webinar probably and a couple of hours older, but definitely much more wiser. So thank you very much for joining in. And I hand it now back to Jessica to conclude the program. Over to you.
Thank you, Sridhar.
Thank you very much, Sridhar, and to all of our panelists for these great discussions. We're almost heading towards the end of our webinar today, but before that, we would like to share one more video from the Codex Alimentarius to highlight how other organizations are reinforcing the Codex standards all over. And I will hand back to the team, so then we can move forward with our program. Thanks.
Codex Alimentarius is very Codex Alimentarius is a very neutral and science-based standard-setting body.
The role of science within Codex and the importance of providing scientific advice to Codex is to try and ensure that when we start this discussion about standard setting, we at least have a level playing field in terms of our knowledge of an issue.
Because Codex is based on scientific advice research, so that when there's an issue and none of the countries has the research data, then we make a reference to the Codex standards.
It's important that the techniques we use for nuclear science, for measuring things in food and for processing food, complies with the Codex standards. And so we can help Codex in developing their standards, but also Codex helps us. It gives us a framework that we can take to our member countries.
From our interests, having standards that are science-based makes them predictable, makes them globally acceptable, and ultimately helps them protect the consumer.
When countries base their national food safety requirements on an international Codex standard, you sometimes describe it as a safe haven where they're relatively safe from challenge, because Codex standards are based on science, and the SPS agreement requires that measures be based on international standards and on science.
What WTO does is, rather than listen to country A over country B, the first thing they say is there a neutral scientific standard? And for food, that's Codex.
Codex already is the preeminent science-based international food safety and quality standard setting body.
Great. Now, following this last message, we will, well, as any other thing in life, good things come to an end. So first of all, I would like to thank to all of our speakers, our panelists, and participants that are joining us today for the engagement from your end on World Food Safety Day 2025. I think that over the past 90 minutes, we heard from distinguished technical experts about the importance of grounding food safety in science. And all of us explored today global and regional relevance of science-based standards and risk analysis frameworks. We contextualize risks and hazards that are relevant for our region, but also build connections between what are the issues and the possibilities to better address them. We had a successful country-level experience sharing in how evidence-based approaches are applied to food safety policies and regulations, and also highlighted the critical role of global, regional, national, and subnational multi-sector collaboration between food safety stakeholders. I think that from Codex guidance to country practices, the key takeaway for us is clear today. Scientific evidence must remain the cornerstone of effective food safety governance. And looking ahead, we can highlight a couple of priority areas And the first one would be strengthening multi-sectoral collaboration at national, regional level, especially through the use of the One Health approach and whole of government approach. Investing in capacity building, from laboratory systems and surveillance to risk communication and policy development to support the building strong food safety systems. Promoting the adoption and localization of international standards and guidelines, including through the guidance of the Codex texts to suit national contexts. We need to adapt them to the realities of the different nations. Creating the platforms for knowledge exchange, peer learning, technical assistance across the region and beyond. And of course, highlight how much importance we have in awareness. Awareness to translate science into knowledge and to be able to communicate that to the diverse stakeholders that are managing food safety all over. In behalf of FAO and WHO, we remain committed to supporting countries in their journey to develop and implement science-driven food safety systems that are resilient, inclusive, and prepared to address food safety incidents. And in this closing, let us remember that food safety is everyone's business, as highlighted by many of us today, and science is what it makes it effective. So shall we continue with the momentum beyond today, working together to ensure food safety for all? So once again, thank you very much to all of you, and happy World Food Safety Day 2025. See you next time. Thank you very much.
Thank you.